Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Smith, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to this Q&A with Stefan Hell. This is an online Q&A session with Stefan, who is 2014 Nobel laureate in chemistry, and we're delighted to welcome students from all over the world, but particularly from South Korea. We have hundreds of students and others joining us from South Korea and elsewhere, and this is your chance to ask questions. So I do encourage you to use the facility as much as you can. There's a Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. Just type your questions there, and I will endeavor to ask as many as I possibly can. I may not be able to get through all of the questions that come in, but I'll do my best. Now, before we get started, I'm delighted to welcome Lara Spreckmann, who is CEO of Nobel Prize Outreach, to give us some welcoming remarks.
On behalf of Nobel Prize Outreach, I'm very honored to welcome you to this conversation with Stefan Hell. It precedes Nobel Prize Dialogue in Seoul, which takes place in 2021. In times like this, when we all think about why we do things and also about how we spend our precious time on this planet, what could be more meaningful than listening to a person that is so passionate about science, that can tell us what it's like to be a scientist. I hope you enjoy this session with Nobel laureate Stefan Hell, who will be joined by Professor Roe, the president of the National Research Foundation of Korea. I would like to thank the Korean Academy of Science and Technology for our collaboration and our Nobel International partners for your support.
Thank you very much, Laura. And next, I'm pleased to welcome Min-Koo Han, who is the president of CAST, to give welcoming remarks from the Korean side.
Good evening to our Korean friend. Good morning to our European participant. Thank you very much and welcome everyone for participating in today's online talk held as preliminary event for the Nobel Prize Dialogue Seoul 2021. For those of you who wish to pursue your dream in the field of science, or if you have already chosen to become a scientist, you may have wondered what it would be like to live as a scientist. If you are one of them, you have come to the right place at the right time. Professor Stefan Hell, who is 2014 Nobel laureate in chemistry, will provide his very, very valuable experience and a lot of information to you about being a scientist. Also, Professor Jung-Hye Roe, President of National Research Foundation of Korea, will give you a wonderful insight as a being scientist. Dr. Adam Smith, Chief Scientific Officer, will coordinate today's talk. If you want to be a scientist, then I assure you that today's event will give you the fresh and new motivation for you. Last but not least, I look forward to meeting you at the venue of Nobel Prize Dialogue Seoul 2021, which will be held on October 31st next year. Thank you very much and have wonderful experience.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Han, and thank you both for those lovely opening remarks. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome Stefan Hell. Stefan, hello.
Hello.
So, you're in Göttingen. Tell us where you're joining us from.
I'm in Göttingen right now at my working place, the Max Planck Institute for Biophysical Chemistry. It's very nicely located on the foot of a hill, and I have a very nice view actually from here.
And this is your office you're sitting in now?
It is my office, yeah. That's the blackboard behind me, and where I sometimes write something on it, so new ideas or anything. Jot down things sometimes.
That's nice that you still use a blackboard.
It's the old-fashioned way, you know, but I tend to feel, although there is no evidence for that, that it comes easy, ideas come easily with chalk, you know, at blackboard. But maybe I'm a very old-fashioned type of scientist in that sense. So that's why I'm still using a blackboard.
Well, you're a great builder of models, aren't you? So I suppose drawing and modeling is a very connected thing.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I'm trying to kind of model things in my head. So I'm trying to figure out how things could work out in the end. And then I'm thinking things through, and I need to have a sort of visual reference for what I'm doing. And this is why I like to jot down things and scribble something on a blackboard, on a piece of paper. That's the way I'm thinking. I cannot just think by, say, walking in the woods or something like that. That wouldn't work for me well. But I have to, jot it down.
Well, questions are already coming in, and I'm going to jump into those in a minute. But first, I'd just like to start with a question to you, which is kind of central to the whole story of your Nobel Prize, which is that you believed it was possible to break the Abbe diffraction limit, but practically everybody else thought it wasn't possible. And so the question is, what gave you the confidence for many years to pursue a dream that other people told you should not be pursued?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I felt at the time that I thought very hard about the problem, harder than anyone else. And also felt that physicists kind of put the problem aside. They felt it's so well understood that you don't have to think about it anymore. But I thought about the problem and realized that there might be a way to get around the diffraction barrier by including the properties of the fluorophores. It's about fluorescence microscopy in the end. And so at some point I became convinced that's a very viable way to go. And my gut feeling or my physics intuition told me, you just have to look careful enough and think hard enough about the problem, then there is a way.
Very nice. But the confidence was also born on knowledge, and I'm sure that will come out in the discussions.
That's correct. Yeah, you have to have a very good, say, background knowledge. And I was the type of student who thought very hard and very deeply. I locked myself up in a room for hours thinking about the problem. And once you get out of that room feeling with the feeling that, okay, now I understood it, then of course this gives you a kind of self-confidence. And I had this self-confidence in the end.
How nice to understand something properly. That's quite something. Ronnie Kim has sent in a question asking when you first decided to become a scientist.
Oh, that's a very good question. I always liked science in school, and I had physics teachers, to be honest, who kind of felt that I'm slightly better than the others, and they kind of sort of encouraged me to become a physicist. And so there was a very positive feedback. At the same time, these physics teachers also were role models as individuals. Their way of thinking and the way they interacted with the students was very unique. And so both aspects, both the science and also the role models, the people as role models, the teachers as role models, kind of very naturally led me to becoming a scientist, because I was kind of attracted to this way of thinking about the world, say from a physics viewpoint or natural sciences viewpoint.
But I know that you had doubts at some points about whether you were going to continue. And Azik Azar has just asked, what gave you the confidence to stay in science?
Yeah. Because I was very much attracted to it. As I said, I like to think problems to the very end. I'm trying to come up with models that kind of describe the natural science problem in the most simplest way that you can imagine. And so I felt for me, it was like a discovery. Of course, I didn't discover the things that were in the textbook because they were already discovered. But when reading the textbooks, I felt as though I would discover something for myself, which was very insightful. So learning science was kind of a discovery for me and a very interesting journey.
That's really interesting. It's a lovely idea that one can make discoveries without it being new. It's just a personal discovery of something
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you may read a novel, or you may read, I don't know, something very thrilling or so, and then you also learn about a crime novel, for example. Learn about something that is unanticipated. And so it was also for me. So when reading a textbook, actually a physics textbook, oh, I didn't know that, say conductivity in solids work like that. How interesting. This is really interesting and fascinating. So I got fascinated actually with natural phenomena. And I felt reading, say, physics textbooks or natural science textbook is like a journey that is accompanied with discoveries, of course, personal discoveries, not real discoveries.
You know, it connects so well with a story that I was told once by the theoretical physicist and Nobel laureate T.D. Lee, who said that when he first read F equals ma, Newton's law, he didn't believe it. And it took him about a year of reading to really make him understand it. And that amazed me because, of course, being boring, I just read it and thought F equals ma, okay, that's true, right, fine, move on. But to really think through, understand, that's special. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Okay, what sort of problems interest you most? Asked Tamal Das. What are the ones that appeal?
Yeah, I mean, so as you may know, in my career, I focused on more or less a single problem, to be honest. That was the resolution problem. And I got fascinated with that for actually by coincidence. And I wanted to get down to the highest possible resolution imaginable. And in light microscopy, or in fluorescence microscopy to be specific, the highest possible resolution is the resolution at the size of the molecule itself, of the size of the fluorescent molecule. That is about 1-2 nanometers, so about 100 times or 200 times beyond the so-called diffraction barrier. And so most of my ideas revolved around that problem. And also after the Nobel Prize, I worked on that problem, say, improving the resolution further and getting down to that, say, it's a maximum resolution possible, which is the molecular scale resolution of 1-2 nanometers. So this was, so to speak, my life story in terms of science, and the only problem that I worked on.
Just the one problem.
Just one problem. And I think, honestly, if you really work, say, thoroughly on something, solving one problem is enough. You don't have to solve 2 or 3. I mean, if there's another interesting problem coming up that fascinates me, and there might be one, I might go after it. But I think that resolution problem was a very interesting problem to pursue.
So this connects with a question just asked by Jung-Hye Roe. And he asked what it takes to be a scientist. But I suppose you could change that question a little and ask, is it necessary to be so focused on single problems like that in order to be a good scientist?
I think there are very many different, say, types of scientists. There is not just science is there are many problems in science, many problems. And this is why you need different personalities. It's not that there is a specific personality. And personally, I was the person who was focused on a certain type of problem. But there are very successful scientists. They have moved from one topic to the next topic, the next topic. Some of them, say, and they have been successful in all of them. Personally, I think I was attracted to sorting out a single fundamental problem, and arguably many successful scientists, the majority of successful scientists, have concentrated on a single problem. So there's more scientists who are focused than scientists who are not focused. But having said that, of course, you can be successful by focusing at least successively on several problems.
But presumably there's a limit. You have to be focused enough to be successful. You can't.
I think so, because in the end, I mean, some discoveries come by pure coincidence, but you have to have a prepared mind, as we all know. Then it's something you cannot really control in a way. Some problems, they require attention, and they require attention over years. And then in retrospect, the solution of the problems look very easy, but they are not easy when you start out with it. So in retrospect, everything looks trivial. Even in my case, I mean, it all boils down to separating molecules by states. But I didn't know at the time I started that this is the only way of doing it, or perhaps this is the most effective way of doing it. I just knew that it has to be something about states, and it has to work out with states. But I didn't know that in the end it would boil down to something that simple. In retrospect, of course, after a certain while, it looked like that, yeah, and still is like that to the very day.
Continuing on that theme, Yeun An asks whether there's ever been a crisis in sort of self-belief during your research. Have you ever thought, I just can't do this anymore?
Yes, actually many times. The truth is many times. So I spent a very important part of my career in Finland, which is where I had actually the idea of STED microscopy, which was the first concept that really overcame the diffraction barrier in a fundamental way by turning molecules on and off. And of course, that was just an idea, and I didn't have the opportunities to really work it out and to do it experimentally, at least not to the level that it would convince the world. And so I felt that I may drop out of science. I remember that many nights. So I had difficulties falling asleep because I felt I may drop out in a month or two, not having enough. My stipend would run out and things like that. Did I feel that, okay, well, I don't know. So I had some sort of, I wouldn't call it crisis because I enjoyed what I did. But still, I had doubts whether I would be successful in the end. I had serious doubts. That's right. It was not like that, oh, I'm the great guy and I will succeed and eventually win a Nobel Prize. No way. And honestly, at that time, I never ever thought about big accolades or Nobel Prizes or something, because also microscopy at that time was not at the center of physics. And I'm trained as a physicist, not even as a biophysicist. And so I felt this is so peripheral to real physics that this will never get big attention. But in the end, it came differently.
Did you just have to pull yourself out of those moments yourself, or was there anybody to help you? Did anybody give you guidance?
Yeah, in the end, you have to pull yourself out in a way. But of course, I had support by say, moral support by the people surrounding me, of course. Friends who said, you should keep on going. My parents supported me at that time. My girlfriend at that time say, well, you're really good. But we never know. I mean, no one can tell you really. I mean, in the end, you have to decide yourself whether you carry on or not.
Chandra Mishra asks the question of what should a scientist's main goal be? That's a big question. So I suppose make it smaller. What has your main goal been? To solve the problem, I guess.
Yes, and I enjoyed doing it. So even at that time, I felt that it's not great to be a professor or an accomplished scientist. It's great to make discoveries. So the path to making the discovery is actually the enjoyable path in the life of a scientist. And I must say, the most rewarding moments for me were when I realized this is going to work out. It's 100% sure this is going to work out. It's not just a dream. It will work out. I didn't know to which extent it will work out. Of course, I was hoping that at some point we will go down to true molecular scale resolution, but I didn't know at that time whether it would work out. But realizing that it will work out in the end, that was the gratifying moment for me. And so my advice for young scientists is not to think about what the goal is in the end, but to enjoy the path towards the goal. And if there is if you can't enjoy that for some reason, don't do it. It's not a goal that is the goal. It's actually the path towards the goal.
That's fascinating. It's very difficult not to get distracted by career structures and the next step up and all of that. Why?
Yeah,
you're lucky to have been immune from feeling that pressure.
How? Actually, Adam, to be honest with you, I had to spend a substantial fraction of my time at that time, finding a job or making sure that I will be able to continue. So at that time, I spent, I would say, 15% of my time or so, even 20% at times, to be sure that I get another stipend or another job, and that there is at least some acknowledgement or some feedback, positive feedback from the community, so that I can continue. So that was kind of distractive. So what I may say in retrospect, if the very first in a certain field, the really very, very first, with a radically new idea, it's very hard unless you have very strong supporters. I got supporters later on. Once I entered the Max Planck system, of course, then there was support, and the support became more and more and more the more successful I was. So at the time, I didn't need it anymore. The support was strongest, and now I have a lot of support, but do I need it? I'm not sure.
It seems to be a theme that's resonating with our audience because the questions keep coming in, circling around this. So Oromita Mitra asks whether the pressure of an academic career ever bogs you down. Good question.
I think personally, that's my view, but it's not. I'm not saying this should be the view of science. I kind of reluctantly accept the notion of an academic career or scientific career, because I think science, from my perspective, should be a journey towards a discovery or towards doing something that really has an impact. So I respect scientists that have a bad career in terms of, say, career or accolades or jobs and so on, but have a deep insight and provided humanity with a deep insight. There could be scientists in industry anywhere. So I don't care about really ranks or something like that. So I really care about if somebody is really dedicated to science and comes up with an insight or with a discovery that is really unusual. So career, I have problems with that. So I know others have a different view on that, but personally, yeah, I don't like career builders. I try to avoid such people in my life.
So what sort of people do you get into your lab? What sort of people do you look for?
It's a good question. And it's very hard. If somebody applies, it's very hard to know what motivates that person. And of course, in a job interview, say lasting an hour, or a presentation lasting an hour, half an hour, or maybe a day or so, you cannot really tell. Sometimes you have a sixth sense that tells you, oh, this person is just after becoming famous or something like that. And then, of course, I try to avoid that person. I'm, of course, fascinated, not only attracted, but fascinated by people who really have a kind of naive view of science. They want to do something. They are attracted by science, not because they need to attain a certain goal or I don't know what, but those who really are kind of naive, put it that way, a very, very naive approach to making science.
And so that might lead you to do all sorts of kind of crazy things if you take a nice naive approach to science. How do you identify, it's a question that's been asked by Irina, how do you identify what is novel and valuable and what is crazy?
That's very hard. I mean, in retrospect, it's always easy to say, okay, this is novel and this was novel at the time and this was not, because you never know the outcome. And in my case, I could have failed, of course, and it would not have been important. But you can see to some extent if somebody picks a subject, a research subject that is very original. And I think a part of the originality is actually the picking of the subject. If somebody works in a field that is already crowded and everyone accepts already, then this shows that the person is not that original, at least not in terms of choosing the subject. And I think that's the criteria number one. And then it's very, very hard to tell if sorting out the problem will work out in the end. So my experience is that tentatively people tend to work very, very close to existing subjects, and I think this is a problem. And this is also why I have some issues with grant agencies, because usually grant agencies and writing grants and getting the grants applied, that kind of leads to a perpetuation of existing fields. And so I'm not very fond of that. Put it that way.
So Rahim Apurbu asks how hard you have to work to be a scientist. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. How hard do you work, Stefan?
Okay, well, it's a very good question. How hard? Okay, I'm giving you the straight answer. You should not work hard. If you work hard, leave science. I tell you why. If it feels for you like hard work, then you're doing the wrong thing. So you should do the kind of things that look hard for others, but feel like pleasure for you. So in that sense, I think if it feels like hard work, it means that you're not really enjoying it. So I think it's kind of mutually exclusive. If you do it because you like to do it, because it's fun, because it's pleasure, then you automatically work in such a way that others will perceive that hard work. But it should be others who think that you work hard, not yourself.
Okay, so if you ask the question, then you're asking the wrong question, because you shouldn't be thinking of it as work at all.
That's correct. Yeah, that's a straight way of putting it.
Answer.
That's a tough answer. I agree, but I really mean it. I really mean it. So I worked hard, yes, but it didn't feel for me like hard work because I enjoyed what I did, and so this is really key. This is really key because if it feels like hard work, you're probably not creative enough. You're creative in a moment of, say, joy or happiness, or you feel kind of content with what you're doing, and then you're creative. Then the new ideas come in, and then you find a solution and puts you in a good mood, and then something new comes out. But if it feels like, oh my goodness, still have to work out this, and I have to sort out that equation and that thing, I hate it, and forget it, then don't do it.
So Rahim follows up by asking how you manage your time then, because okay, you're playing, not working, but you still have to, I don't know, go home and do the washing up and, I don't know, see people and do all the things that a busy world requires. So are you good at parceling your time, or do you just devote yourself entirely to work?
Well, you would have to ask my wife. No, but seriously, yeah, I'm kind of doing it. I have coped so far, put it that way. So I still manage to live a life, and I have 4 children, and I've been married for a long time. So I kind of managed, but I'm not saying I'm very good at that or so. I think everyone has to find out what's best for him or for her. So one way of kind of relaxing and getting self-organized, I'm working out. I'm going to the woods here for long strolls. Actually, so what I'm doing right now, actually what I do frequently during this COVID-19 pandemic, I walk up a hill in the woods basically every day, which used the place where Werner Heisenberg and Niels Bohr used to walk up in the 1920s to sort out the mysteries of quantum mechanics. Maybe subconsciously, I think I might get a similar important idea, but I don't think I will get it. But at least
how's it going so far? Are they coming?
Sorry.
How's it going so far? Are the ideas coming?
But yeah, sometimes. Yeah, maybe I think it has not been that profound yet, but hopefully I keep on going up the hill every day. Maybe at some point it'll work out. But you see, but this is a way of relaxing and doing other things and just not staying back in the lab or at the desk or something like that in the office.
So walking in the woods has been part of your way of dealing with the pandemic. But Henry Fong asks whether COVID-19 has impacted your work in other ways. Does it make a difference to what you do?
Well, to be honest with you, it cut down the traveling. I didn't travel so much, honestly. So I went only to very selected places. So I know that many Nobel laureates tend to travel, but in my case, it would be very difficult because I'm still active. I'm doing science, and of course, the students expect that I'm contributing to the work that is being done in the lab, and so I have to push science forward. So for me, traveling was quite a, I must say, a burden to some extent. And the positive side of the pandemic, if I may say so, is that I don't have to travel that much. But I very much look forward to coming to Korea next year. So don't get me wrong. But that's one of the selected events that I really love to go, and interacting with young students and speaking with them. But I think, and I'm quite convinced that the pandemic, by forcing scientists to stay in the same place, may lead to new insights that you may not have expected. So we will see, of course, little disruptions maybe in 5-10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, and it will be very interesting to see how this pandemic actually impacted science. I don't mean the virology or so, but science in general.
Do you do any teaching to undergraduates? So has it impacted their lives greatly?
Honestly, because I'm in a Max Planck Institute, I don't really do teaching. I give lectures, maybe 2 or 3 lectures per semester or so, but actually I don't do teaching. But I have students in the lab, so I'm interacting with the students. So my teaching is a kind of lab training and discussing data and this kind of thing.
So in this conversation, you of course are being a role model for many of the people listening, all of the people listening. But Soraya Hoffs asked whether you yourself have role models.
A role model per se, I would say no. I mean, I admire many scientists, but I wouldn't call them role models, because in the end you have to find your own way of doing science, and I think copying somebody doesn't work, because different times, different subjects, different personalities, you're surrounded by different people, but of course I mean, I admire Richard Feynman, being a physicist. So this was a very interesting person. As a very original thinker. So I have always admired people who are not afraid of thinking about a problem in a different way and coming up with a totally different view of things that is still self-consistent. I think it has to be self-consistent. I think this is where, say, science departs from art, because also an artist can think creatively about things, but in the end, it has to work out, and it has to be experimentally solid and sound. And so I like thinking about problems in a new way, but in the end, it has to be true. It has to be self-consistent, and it must be, say, confirmed by data.
Okay, thank you. So changing direction a little bit, Ankur Singh wants to know whether you think it's necessary for students to be A grade in order to be successes as scientists. Do you have to get the best grades?
Well, the answer perhaps is no, of course, but because you never know, But of course, I mean, if you get Ace, it means that you have a certain talent, or you have a certain inclination of doing things. Of course, A grades do not mean that you're becoming a successful scientist and so on. But this brings me to a very related topic. Does knowledge help? Yes. In order to be successful in the end, you have to have knowledge. You have to know the canonical knowledge. But small amount of ignorance is also very helpful. So a small dosage of ignorance is helpful. So in my case, to give you an example, being trained as a physicist, I knew a little about chemistry, believe it or not. So I didn't know much about the fluorescent dyes. For me, the fluorescent dyes, they had just simple states. And so when I came up with the stat idea, I looked at the dye molecules, the fluorophores, with the eye of physicists. But there's a lot of photochemistry going on that really bleaches the dye and so on. I didn't know about that. Had I known about that, I probably would not have made the proposal. So not knowing all the problems, of course, gives you the courage of doing it, pursuing it. So a little bit of ignorance is very useful. So when I spoke with the chemists, they would say, "Oh, this is not going to work because there will be this problem, that problem, and that problem, and so on." And it was good that I didn't know, because otherwise I would not have tried. And others, of course, they may have thought about the same thing and didn't do it. And so it's in that sense, yes, having Ace is good, but you don't have to think that you have to know everything, because knowledge, of course, canonical knowledge can be a sort of a hindrance.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly comforting to know that a little bit of ignorance can be a good thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then Adtia wants to know how you approach potential collaborators. And that's an interesting question, because you have been quite a solo worker. through your life. So
Initially,
how do you
yes.
decide?
Initially, yes. So initially, I had to focus on sorting out the problems with overcoming the diffraction barrier. But once I got to a certain point, not being a biologist and also not being a real chemist, so to speak, I had to collaborate. I needed chemists to synthesize dyes for me, organic chemists, and I needed biologists who use the microscope to prove that you can see something that others couldn't see before. And the roles have always been clear. I think collaborations work out well. That's my personal view. If the roles are very clear, then it's very clear that the person A contributes with that, and the person B contributes with that, and then in the end, of course, everything works out. Usually, these people have approached me directly, and in all cases, basically, it worked out well.
So, but what's the best way of approaching a collaboration? Because it's a very difficult thing when you're young, especially, to know whether you should share information with people or whether you should hold it to yourself.
Yeah, but you see, I didn't collaborate with people who competed me. So I collaborated with people who were who complemented me. So I think the thing is that you work with people who have different expertise. Collaboration within the same field indeed can be difficult and can lead to tensions or to strain and to issues, and that's very hard. And you have to really make clear who is doing what and what's the goal. But if the people are complementing each other, then it's not a problem.
But in general, for a young person who has, say, their first result that they're excited about,
Yeah.
What's your advice? Do you tell people? Do you keep it to yourself?
Okay, that's a very good point. You see, in the past, it was very difficult because I mean, the way telling the world that you have discovered something was to submit it to a journal, and then you could only hope that in the end the editor would like it. Otherwise, he would not send it out for review. It happened to me a couple of times, and then the reviewers will like it, and then you can publish it, and it all gets delayed by a fair amount, 6 months to a year, even more. Thanks God, that's over, I would say, because now there are archives. There's physics archives, there is bioarchive, and now you can decide for yourself when the world should know about it. And I think this is in my view, this is a total game changer because it's very clear who discovered it. The person who really puts it on archive first, most likely, unless there is some weird thing going on in the background. But this the priority can never be taken away. And I think this is people have not realized how that will change science, and it will change the way credits are, of course, attributed to individuals. And I would strongly encourage young scientists, once they've come up with something and they feel that they may not be that well connected or the topic may not be accepted, just put it on archive. And if it turns out that this is important, then it's very clear who discovered it.
Good answer. And if it turns out to be crazy, then everybody knows you're crazy.
Exactly. I mean, you have to take a risk, and I think that but you may come up with another idea, and maybe one of them is right. And I think getting a Nobel, I mean, I don't think it hurts having a bad idea if the one that is really critical has a fundamental contribution to say advancing mankind. I mean, so what?
So one last question before we bring in our next panelist. A question from Lee Jin Yong, and it's a question that I guess many children struggle with, especially in relation to talking to their parents. It's, should I choose what I'm good at or what I like?
Well, ideally, you like the things that you're good at.
It doesn't always work like that, right?
Well, yeah. But to be serious, of course, it can happen that people do not really see what they are good at. They think they are good at something, but they are not. But that's a very problematic case then. But apart from that, say, very unusual situation, usually people are good at the things they like, because liking something brings out the best of you. And so the answer to the question is, find something that you like and you're good at.
Okay. That's succinct and clear. Fine. Excellent. Great. Now, it is my enormous pleasure to introduce Jung-Hye Roe, who is head of the National Research Foundation of Korea. And she is very kindly joining us for a conversation with the students and with Professor Hell. And I just have to do a slight adjustment to my screen here to accommodate 3 people. There we go. So, Professor Roe, welcome.
Hello, nice seeing
Hello.
you, and thank you for inviting me.
It's a real pleasure to have you here with Stefan Hell. Thank you.
Yes,
So
yes,
we've talked about a lot already. I think maybe you've been listening and hearing the marvelous questions that are coming in from all over the place, especially from Korean audience. One thing we haven't addressed yet is the question of diversity in science. Diversity, of course, takes many forms. There's gender diversity, but there's also socioeconomic diversity, there's international diversity. So would you like to talk a little bit about the importance of diversity in science and why we should promote it and how we can promote it?
Yes, thank you for asking. In biology, diversity is the key component of healthy ecosystem. And in science, collaboration with people of different expertise always produce outstanding results, as Stefan has brought up and answered in the previous interview. And people with different educational background and culture or gender or nationalities, I think they have different perspectives and viewpoints. And when they collaborate, I think they produce, outstanding results emerge, which is greater than the sum of individual separate performances. And I think in that way, diversity matters and diversity wins. But in scientific society as a whole, I think the improvement of diversity has been slow, I think, especially in terms of gender diversity. And especially in Korea, the gender diversity is improving very, very slow. And I think there are still many barriers that prevent girls and young female students from entering to science, technology, engineering, and math areas, and also preventing them to pursue lifelong works, scientific activities. And I think if you neglect talent from girls and young women scientists, then you lose a lot, and it's a loss for the research community, and it hinders the advancement of science. And I think that's why we need diversity in scientific community. Yeah. And you asked how to promote it.
Yes, I'll bring Stefan in a minute, but what do you do? What's the main thing you can do to change it?
Yeah.
No, please, Professor Roe. What's
the
main thing you should?
I think it was encouraging. I mean, in one example, that this year I was delighted to see that the Nobel Prize were given to 2 women scientists in chemistry, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuelle Charpentier, and also a woman physicist, Andrea Ghez. And I think that gave a really stimulating signal to girls and young female students to enter science area, and also tell them that you should believe in your potential. So I think that's a very good signal, and to show great success role models. And even though Stefan said that you probably don't need a role model, but I think girls and women need a lot of role models who are successive, because the examples are not that many.
Well, I guess you need a role
And
model
also,
to start. Yeah. Sorry, you need a role model to start, and then you need to make your own way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. And I think there's still a lot of biases against evaluating women's capability. I mean, either exposed or hidden. And I think that kind of diversity, that something like bias that women are weak in math and science, I think that's not grounded. And I mean, there is a report that, for example, exam grades of math and science for girls is higher in countries with higher gender equality conditions. So there's a strong correlation between the exam grades of girls in math and science with the societal gender equality index. I mean, so the bias that women are weak in math and science, I think it's not biologically grounded, or no ground for justification. So it's important to reduce that bias as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Stefan, would you like to respond to any of the things that Professor Roe has said?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's right in basically all aspects. The only thing that I would like to add is, personally, the way I see it, diversity comes naturally if you select for the best, because there's talent distributed in many, say, populations. And of course, there are cultural reasons why in some countries or at certain times, certain populations were selected, of course, or they were reinforced. But if you look for the best, you naturally come up with a wide variety of people. And an example I would like to give you, I'm football or soccer, whatever you like. I watch that, and so if you look at a very good team like Bayern München in Germany, it's a very good team. And if you look at them, I mean, you see racial diversity, you see cultural diversity. Why? Because they select the best. And so they don't look where does the person come from, which nationality or so. Then it naturally comes as in a big variety. And I think the same is true in science. So I'm not so sure if we have to make diversity, perceive it as a kind of religion, that we have to be diverse or something that has to be done at all costs. I'm not sure whether that will stand the test of time. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not saying it's not the case, but I'm not sure if it'll stand the test of time. But I think it comes in a very natural way. If you look at my lab, it's very diverse, culturally, ethnically, and so on, languages, backgrounds. It's quite natural that it works out that way.
Right. I agree in that respect. But there's also a hidden bias that somehow doesn't give enough credit to women for their work. So I think in that sense, we should be sensitive to give due credit to women scientists, because sometimes I mean, if the same work was done, it's easily evaluated that men lead the project and women follow, something like that kind of hidden bias. So I think it's important to give enough credit, and also encourage women students to go forward, because they are easily discouraged by that kind of hidden bias. Yes. So
I fully agree with you.
Active, recommend or encourage women students to pursue their career in science.
I agree, and especially in some in certain circumstances, women are discouraged from pursuing a career in science or doing something that is perceived as not women kind of area. So I fully agree with you. So personally, I have I believe that I don't have a bias. My mother liked science, and so she played a very important role in my life initially as a child. She was a teacher and kind of she was my own teacher in first grade, as a matter of fact. So for me, it was very natural that women can be extremely successful, clever, and so on. And although I have a sort of physics chemistry lab, there are many women here. So I've not counted them. So maybe half of the lab members are women. And for me, this is something very natural. So it very much depends on the person who is responsible, depends on the circumstances, on the cultural background. With regard to the Nobel Prize, I agree with you. Yes, I think Jennifer Doudna, Emmanuelle Charpentier, and Andrea Goetz will be role models for many women. But I'm absolutely convinced that had they been men and had invented CRISPR-Cas, they would have gotten the prize as well, for sure.
Sure.
And because this was the accomplishment, and it didn't really matter. I'm sure it didn't matter for the Nobel Committee that these are women. I'm 100% sure. They did their best in selecting the best possible candidates for that prize.
Sure.
So much of the conversation we were having earlier, Stefan, was about self-belief and your own belief, and sometimes your doubt that you could do things. But it's all about inspiring self-belief in people. Everyone has the capacity, but it's the fact that they need to believe that they can actually do this, and that society should allow them to do it. So, for instance, we also talked about how hard people work, and we do all know that successful scientists spend an awful lot of time playing or anyway pursuing their science, and it's difficult to do that if you're also expected to be looking after a house and looking after children and all the rest of it. These barriers.
Again, that burden of taking care of childbirth, and also house chores, so uneven distribution of labor at home, and that kind of things are a real burden for young starting female scientists. And I think to reduce that burden is really needed to improve the gender diversity. And that can be done by providing helping hands and friends and societal systems, and also the environment, cultural environment. And in that sense, Stefan, you said that you see about 50% of women around in your physics department, but it's not like that in Korea. It's in physics department, it's probably about 10% or less, or in engineering area also. So I think we need to encourage more women talents to come into science field.
The conversation thus far has been pretty much all directed towards young scientists who are thinking about the possibility of going on to become research scientists. But of course, many young scientists want to pursue other options in life. So, Professor Roe, would you like to talk a tiny bit about what career paths are open to scientists and what the world needs from its young scientists now?
Right. I think most of young scientists thinks that after they get a degree like PhD, they want to become professors at universities or researchers in a very prestigious public research institutes like Max Planck and different type. But the openings for that area, like university openings, are real slow. I mean, it's get real narrower. Gets narrower, and I think there are more possibilities outside like private institutions, and also very good innovative companies. So you can go to there and develop very good products that's beneficial to humankind. And also they can, if they're good at math, and they go to financial fields, or some goes to media, like you, maybe Adam. so do in the interface between science and the people, and general people. So I think there are many places that scientists can go, and a lot of companies and institutions, they require scientists to come in. So I like to say that just think about professors is not good, because many Korean young students, probably about a third of them wants to become professors if they study science. But it's not the only way. There are a whole lot of good things to do. Yeah. Right.
So, Stefan, what advice do you give to people who you think are not going to find their way in the research path, or do you offer alternative suggestions to people?
I think there's many ways of living a very, say, fulfilled life. And so, of course, there's life outside science, no doubt. And there might be even better life outside science. Personally, I give them the advice to find different types of jobs and not to be very, say, stiff in their choices. I mean, as Professor Rowe just mentioned, many people just want to go to science, want to become professors, and then they're totally devastated once they realize that it doesn't work for them. And so in my early stages of my career, of course, I always say, okay, it may not work out, I may not break the diffraction barrier, and then of course I'm going to industry. In my case, it was a bit easier because I did my work as a PhD student in a startup company. So I was kind of sort of used to so working in a sort of industry related environment. And so what I did, I started companies myself with my former postdocs and students. So I have say spin-off companies, and so I advised them to take a job with them. So these are growing companies and very successful, and many do so. Actually, so in my spin-off company, there are about, say, 30 people from my lab. Of course, they deliberately opted for that because they felt they can make use of the knowledge that they gained here, and it's well paid and it works well for them, and so that worked for them extremely well. And they also can relate with science because they do things they learned here and they liked. But many, of course, are in different industries like automotive industries, or say real chemistry industries, and so on.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it tends to, many students in Korea tends to think there's some kind of rankings in jobs. So professors on top, and then researchers in public institution, and then researchers in the companies, and then researchers in private institutes, something like rankings. And I think there's nothing like that. And I know many professors who are very dissatisfied because they cannot pursue research or teach as they like. So I think, I mean, every kinds of jobs are equally open, and I mean, it can be very satisfactory. So as long as you get a good position that fits you, then every jobs are very, very good. Yeah. I mean, if they require science, scientific background.
I mean, Korean industry has become very, very successful. If you think about LG and so on, I mean, this must have something to do with the extremely well-trained scientists in Korea. I have no doubt about it, because they are the ones that really push the industry. It's the same in Germany, by the way, and in any country.
Right. Yeah. So when young students wants to choose a job, I think usually the parents, it's from an old time, and they have very old, outdated perspective of what you can do when you do science, and they worry about uncertainties. I mean, many uncertainties. But I hope the young students are very courageous to do whatever they like and good at, like you talked before. I think to be more brave in working out their potential in science. Yeah.
That's an important thought. And it takes us back to that self-belief and that understanding what you really want to do yourself that Stefan was talking about. I'm afraid we've run out of time almost completely. We have a minute left. And so let me finish with a question that's come in. Aliyah Abbas asks what the most rewarding part of being a scientist is. So if I could ask Professor Rowe to answer that from a general perspective. You're a successful research scientist, but from a general perspective of being a scientist, what's the most rewarding thing? And then we'll finish with Stefan. So first, Professor Roe.
Yeah. For me, it's the time when I know that I discovered something that's not been known before. Yeah. Right. So that's the best rewarding point. And also it's double rewarding if I know that that can benefit mankind. Yeah. Not long future. Right.
Yeah. Well, and may I just say that even Stefan's mention earlier of personal discoveries of understanding Newton's laws or whatever can presumably benefit mankind, because what you're learning is a critical way of thinking and an analytical way, which is exactly what the world needs right now. So,
right.
Sorry, Stefan.
Right. I agree.
I mean, I could not put it better. I think the most gratifying moment for me was when I realized that I have seen something, or realized something that is really profound, and it's unique, and maybe nobody has thought about it or seen this before, and I can have a valuable contribution to advancing mankind or humankind. And I think that is, of course, a very gratifying moment. It's not the prizes. So many people ask me, oh, did you feel elated by the Nobel Prize? The answer is no. Honestly, I mean, you interviewed me right after the prize. It was kind of interesting. And I was surprised, and I didn't know what to say, and overwhelmed. But when I realized you get a resolution that is 10 times better, and then finally 100 times better than what I was brought up with, you know, this is really the gratifying moment, and this is something great.
Okay, that's a beautiful thought to end on. It's been a fabulous conversation, and particularly it was a lovely conversation listening to the two of you talking to each other. So thank you both, Professor Roe, Stefan Hell, for joining us today. The audience has, from all their questions, have clearly enjoyed it greatly. I've been inspired. I hope they have too. And thank you all for joining us, audience and our two panelists alike. And goodbye from us all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.